Shelter Point Single Cask Quails Gate Old Vines Foch Reserve Finish and Pinot Noir Finish. How are these? Wait for the whiskey whistle. Hey my whiskey people, Mark here at Whisky Whistle on YouTube, sharing a little whiskey awesomeness from Winnipeg, the center of North America, bringing you Shelter Point Single Cask Quails Gate Old Vines Foch Reserve Finish. That is the longest name in whiskey, I think. And the Quails Gate Pinot Noir Finish. We're going to be reviewing these on the show today. And these bottles, well, this bottle and this sample comes thanks to, well, Jacob Wiebe from the distillery. He is part of the family involved with Shelter Point. And I put on a Canadian whiskey experience, as I called it. And he came all the way from BC for that, adjusted his airplane tickets, and he came, and then he left us with the rest of the bottles. That was super great of him to have done that. And my first chance to try some very unique Shelter Point, I have another one, which is their standard single malt. That I will review very soon. That won't be the focus for today, however, even though it looks like I have enough glasses, but I don't. Anyway, so we're going to get that poured right away. This one is, I forget how many days he said this was finished in these Old Vines Foch Reserve. Well, what's it called? It's called Quails Gate Old Vines Foch Reserve. Maréchal Foch Reserve. Now, they've got a really unique cork. Don't try to twist it because it just doesn't work. What you do is you push it and then it comes right out. Just so you know. Okay, let's get that poured. I quite like those corks because they are less interactive with the whiskey. And I believe the seal is pretty good. And I think that's a silicone kind of a ring at the top there as well. So, very nice. Set that there. So that's the Foch Reserve. This is 46% ABV. No chill no chill filtration, no color added. And here's a sample of the Shelter Point Pinot Noir. And the bottle actually went to another Winnipeg Whiskey Club member who was very thrilled to have gotten that. So good for him. And we'll pour in about half of that. Maybe a dash more. There, I want to save a little bit. Quite a difference in color there. This one's actually 50% ABV. And I believe right on the bottle of that Pinot Noir finish, you can see that it was finished for 335 days in these Pinot Noir casks. So we asked him, why didn't you put that in for 30 more days and then be able to call it a year? And what he said was they were checking it and they felt that it had reached a peak and didn't want it to get too oaky or lose its Shelter Pointiness, if you know what I mean. All right, so first of all, we'll check out the color of the Foch Reserve Finish. What do you see there for color? A medium gold, beautiful shade. And when you think that this is a little bit younger, I'm guessing this is 5 to 6 years old, then you can really recognize that it's got quite a rich color for its age. Anyway, and we'll check out the legs of this one. What kind of legs does this Foch Reserve Finish have? Maréchal Foch is not a wine I'm very familiar with. It looks like it's a red variety. Okay. Pretty nice drizzly legs. A little bit on the thinner side, but very showy. So that should have a decent mouthfeel. Okay, let's have a look at the color of the Pinot Noir finish. Considerably darker. Actually, maybe that Foch Reserve is a white wine. I don't know. I know that it's French. Anyway, so this has got a very nice pinky tint to it, doesn't it? Copper with just a slight, that kind of pinkish golden shade in there. When we had this Canadian whiskey experience, we had, I think, 9 different whiskeys during the sit-down tasting, and there were another 6 that we had kind of whiskey festival style. But for many people, this Pinot Noir was the winner amongst 25-year-old Canadian whiskey, 35-year-old Canadian whiskey, a whole bunch of others. All right, so let's check out the legs for this one. Again, this is 50% ABV, so a little bit closer to the most viscous that alcohol gets at 48%, I believe I heard. And yeah, very slow to develop here. And you can see there's a little bit of kind of a slight sedimentiness to this. And this actually makes me happy that they've tried to leave it as natural as possible. So that's cool, I think. Yes. All right. Let's get on to the nose, the palate, and the finish for both of these. Then we'll add a bit of water, check out the nose, the palate, and finish again. And then we'll give it a Whisky Whistle whiskey score for the both of them. Let's get started. That's the Foch Reserve finish. Now you can't get away from the youthfulness. So there is a youthful distillery character here, and I expect amazing things from Shelter Point. Shelter Point, I believe, will end up being just as great as Two Brewers is. Two Brewers has been distilling just slightly longer, and their whiskeys are often a little bit older. In fact, they're putting out a 7-year-old. That should do well. All right, so on the nose, you do get a little bit of that sort of raw spiritness, which here is presenting like a little bit of juicy fruit bubblegum, a slight raw almond note, there is a tad of something slightly fruity and yeasty. That's that wine speaking. And there's also some nice vanilla. A touch of ginger. No cinnamon, no nutmeg. So ginger, vanilla, those raw almonds. And some kind of custardy pudding. All right, on to the palate. Oh, and I forgot to mention, by the way, big, huge thank you to the Winnipeg Whiskey Club member, John. John, thank you so much for loaning me that bottle of yours. Wonderful. It's I have to say it's pretty awesome. I've got all of these great fellas and ladies in the Winnipeg Whiskey Club. We welcome everybody, and they've all been so supportive and helpful. I think I mentioned the whiskey hat that came from Carla, another member, and a whole pile of whiskey from everybody. So that's been really awesome. We were about to taste that, weren't we? Okay, cheers. That's got to be a white wine. It's elegantly sweet. The slight tartness in the palate. Vanilla, apple tarts, maybe a little bit of light raisin pie. It's dry. You do get the ginger. Almost a little bit of white chocolate on the palate. The finish as well, some white chocolate. There's a little bit of umami-ness to this as well. Less than Two Brewers. I think that's a defining difference between these two. A little bit more savory for Two Brewers, as well for Glen Breton over at Glenora Distillery in Canada. But there's still an element there of that sort of slightly seared, mushroomy. I think it's a lovely flavor, especially combined with sweetness and tartness and bitterness all wrapped in one. A little bit of Korean green grape candy. They're this big, and they're the flavor of green grapes. Really fresh green grapes, the ones with seeds in them. And it's called 청포도. So 청포도 사탕, the candy. Beautiful stuff. Beautiful candy. Big, massive piece of candy, though, that's one issue. But occasionally it's nice to have. Anyway, a hint of that sort of a fresh grape note. Grape candy note, I should say. The mouthfeel is a little bit more than just light. Not quite a heavy mouthfeel, but somewhere in between. Kind of like, let's say, if you cut maple syrup, 1 part maple syrup and maybe 4 parts water. The finish, you get the ginger, you get that umami, as I mentioned. Vanilla is right there. A little bit waxy on the palate after you swallow. The finish is a solid medium length, and it leaves as nicely as it came. So a very nicely put together whiskey. Let's add a little bit of water. If I can reach my spoon. There we go. So 1 milliliter. Okay. All right. Now, while that's waiting, let's get on to the nosing and the tasting for the Pinot Noir finish. Sip of coffee to neutralize the palate. And a sip of water to neutralize the coffee. Here we are, the nose. Reminds me so much of a well-finished sherried whiskey. So let's say like 2, 3, 4 years. You would get a real dark fruit note. Some dark chocolate as well, approaching 80%. A very light sweetness, A dash of fresh cinnamon. Not really getting any ginger here. I'm getting some cocoa powder. Fry's cocoa powder. And dark raisins. That prune bag, the bag of a bunch of prunes when the bag is empty. Hot cocoa. It's got this really interesting chocolate cocoa note. And this is, I think, why it was just such a big winner that night. A belter, as Ralphie would say. All right, 50% ABV. Now let's get into the palate here. Cheers. Cheers, Jacob. Much richer. 50% ABV, but it is not hot at all. Very nicely presented. I feel like this is older. That may just be the effect of the casking. You get the chocolate on the palate as well. You get a nice balance of sweet and tartness. Not unlike the chocolate covered marshmallow you get at Halloween and Christmas and Easter. But instead of the cheap milk chocolate or whatever chocolate they use, I think it's not actually chocolate in fact, but wrap that marshmallow in real nice dark chocolate. It's a tad dry, but it's got enough sweetness and richness to really lift up that dryness and just make an overall delicious whiskey package. The finish is quite dry. The chocolate's there. The sweetness carries. The tartness carries as well. And the flavors on the finish are very similar to those on the nose and the palate. This might be a whiskey where everything is very much aligned. I haven't had many of those. Let's have one more sip before we add some water. Chocolate raspberry. Again, dryness on the finish. A little bit of raspberry chocolate. This is predominantly what I'm tasting here, the cocoa chocolate. A bit of dark fruits. A little bit of cinnamon. Maybe a hint of nutmeg in there. All right, let's add some water. Now, if you happen to be in BC or Alberta and you see the double-barreled Quail's Gate Pinot Noir, I would recommend you grab one. Likewise for this Foch Reserve finish. I think that if you are a Glenmorangie Nectar d'Or lover, that would be something that you'll like. Okay, we'll set that down. Let's go back to the Foch Reserve finish. We'll just have a little bit of water. Okay, so with water added, as far as my memory goes, I don't have any on hand here, but it really does remind me of Glenmorangie Nectar d'Or. Very similar. The palate is a dead ringer for that. Now that's Sauternes, and I don't know what the big difference is here, and I think I really need to find out now. Well, this is just so interesting. Alright, so this is from the Quails Gate website. These grapes were hand harvested at our estate vineyard. 30 days on skins maximizes color, with fermentation in 100% new American oak barrels for added complexity. Aged 20 months in a barrel before blending and bottling. Well, that's very interesting. So then the barrel that's being used here had the wine in it for 20 months, which is quite a long period of time. That's a year and 8 months. And about the Foch, so Maréchal Foch is the wine, and again, pardon me for the botching of the French pronunciation. It's an interspecific hybrid French red wine grape variety. It looks very red. So maybe the length of time in that cask was minimal. But regardless, it really reminds me of Nectar d'Or. It's very earthy now. I'm getting a little bit of grassy hay. Again, that slight little bit of white wine note. I guess just regular, just wine note, the slightly yeasty, wineish note. White chocolate as well here. So that's really interesting that these both have these slight linkages to chocolate. And the water really brings that white chocolate to life here. Added sweetness, smoothness, more vanilla. The dryness has been almost completely minimized. And the finish, again, it's sweet and tart. I don't get any umami now with water added, so that's interesting. And the raw almond note has also dissipated. So water has actually helped to kind of loosen up that edgy young whiskey note. Super good. Okay. Let's check out the Pinot Noir finish now. All right, on to the nose now. The Pinot Noir finish with water added. Still very cocoa-esque. Raspberry has now come into the nose. Much less sherry-esque now. And more just this straight, huge cocoa on the nose. So lovely to smell. Such a unique aroma. So enticing. Beautiful to see this in a whiskey. This may be the most chocolate-esque whiskey that I've ever tasted. All right, so on to the palate then. Cheers again. Not much has changed. It's brought out some more sweetness. And that maybe just because we're lessening the effects of alcohol on the tongue, giving you greater access to the flavor. Oh, I love smelling this. More of this big juicy raspberry. The chocolate is slightly moved towards the background with that raspberry lifted up. Slight lemoniness, lemon candy, vanilla. A dash of nutmeg in there. And the finish is beautifully chocolatey, raspberry. It's really, really such a lovely whiskey. I think that Canada can actually produce some world-beating whiskey. Right now, there just isn't enough quantity to get these delicious whiskeys all over the world. This one was 228 bottles. Bottle number 136, by the way. And a similarly small batch for the Pinot Noir finish. Now, from the website, interestingly, they mentioned that this was 2-row barley. So that's very cool. And we also see that the age of the whiskey now, 5.5 years here in American oak, and then 335 days in the Pinot Noir casks. So it's a 6.5-year-old whiskey, which is quite old. It's on their website. It's not on the bottle. It's on the website. But I think that is more than enough to be able to trust that that's the age of the whiskey, 6.5 years. And this is what's telling me that this is just a little bit older, and I think it actually is. Incredible. Well, time to get onto the Whisky Whistle whiskey score for the Shelter Point Single Cask Quail's Gate Old Vines Foch Reserve Finish. What is that going to be? Well, folks, that's going to be 86 out of 100. You heard it, 86 out of 100 is the Whisky Whistle whiskey score for this delicious Foch Reserve finish from Shelter Point. How about the Pinot Noir finish? You have to know this is coming, right? Ladies and gentlemen, the Whisky Whistle whiskey score for Shelter Point Pinot Noir finish is going to be 92 out of 100. You heard it, 92 out of 100 is the Whisky Whistle whiskey score for the Shelter Point Pinot Noir finish. Now you have to know, on Whisky Whistle, I try to avoid other voices of whiskeys when I'm doing my reviews. But really interesting that right here on the Shelter Point website, they talk about dark chocolate and berry jam on the nose, cherry on the palate. I consider that more like a raspberry. Maybe they're thinking a more sour cherry. That's a possibility. But very interesting. I didn't get the nuts that they're talking about here. But delicious whiskey, absolutely. So 92 for the Pinot Noir, 86 for the Foch Reserve finish. But now, before we finish up, I'd like to just highlight a letter that I received, and I think you're looking at this little collection of something new over here, blocking my Kwai Chow Mutai, the Baiju that I have over here. Yes, that's going to be reviewed soon. And I've got this nice glass here, and this letter, and this comes from a Whisky Whistle Crew patron, and his name is Graeme Young. Graeme, I have to thank you so much for sending these delicious things to me. And the big bottle, that's like, I want to say that's a 6-ounce bottle. That's very large. 6 ounces. It's not 4. I think that's 6. 6 ounce. What's that called? The Boston Round. So he sent me this letter, and he says, "Glad to be part of the Whisky Whistle crew and have been enjoying the style, content, reviews, and live streams. Thanks a million. I can't thank you enough." He sent me a couple of real hotshot samples of things, such as a Ben Rinnes 23-year-old. I can't wait. I will review that on the channel. I will, absolutely. And a Kilkerran peat in progress, heavily peated 2019, 59.3% ABV. So excited to have another Kilkerran on the show. Oh, whoa. So anyway, thank you so much for that. But this thing is really cool, and this is from a distillery in New Brunswick known as Moonshine Creek Distillery in Heartland, New Brunswick. And all of the grains are local New Brunswick rye and corn, so very cool. This is 72% ABV. That's quite high. That was the ABV entering the cask. The rye spirit, okay, so he put rye and corn. Okay, so corn over here, rye over there, distilled spirits. So that's corn moonshine and a rye moonshine. And then he put 20%, no. 80, so the corn is 80% corn, 20% malted barley. The rye spirit is 70% ABV, 80% rye, and 20% malted barley. That's a good dollop of malted barley, and yes, that helps with saccharification so that things can actually ferment. Let's pour a little bit of this. So this is, he writes, about 52% ABV, and this is aged and finished by himself. He writes, aged 3 weeks only in a first fill Jack Daniel's refill cask, medium char, that he charred with Pedro Jimenez sherry for 2 weeks prior to filling. This is incredible. So this is doing great stuff at home with barrels that you can buy at shops locally. So I bought this in Winnipeg. Graeme bought that in New Brunswick. I think he's working with bigger barrels than me, I think, but you never know, because if you want to fill a barrel with Pedro Jimenez, then you're going to have to buy a couple bottles of the good stuff, right? So anyway, this is this 52% interesting moonshine that's been finished by Graeme himself. So very cool. I'm so excited to try this, and in return, I'm going to be sending him a sample from this very cask, the contents of which I can't talk about for reasons that I can't mention. Yeah. If you just look around, you may notice why I can't talk about that. Okay, so we have this real big moonshine, but then there's this kind of like a bonfire-y wood note, and also a fresh oaky note as well. That's what you're getting on the nose. The palate, you have this delicious, new make spirit that is delicately intermingled with a little bit of this dried fruity candy-like flavor. And moonshine can often come off as a candy note, so it's really interesting. And look at the color that we're getting here with 3 weeks in a barrel. So I implore you, grab yourself a barrel like that, or a smaller one. That's I think a 4 liter. This one's Spanish oak. I'm saving that one. The American oak was $100 Canadian. And start playing with your spirits and see if you can find something to put in there from a local distiller and have fun with it. Age some wine in there, or maybe a little bit of beer, and that'll help it to sort of take away a little bit of the sappy, raw, oaky notes that you don't want in your whiskey. And then you'll be able to finish it in that barrel and come up with something possibly incredible that you'll enjoy, that'll be unique to you, that you can share with your friends. Anyway, to the good doctor, thank you kindly. That's really great. Beautiful. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show today. Make sure you click the link way over here to subscribe to Whisky Whistle. Hit the bell so you're notified of the future Whisky Whistles through your email inbox. That's the best possible way to help you keep track of the channel and help Whisky Whistle too. And if you've been watching until now and you like what you see here, why not jump in and become a patron on Patreon for the Whisky Whistle Crew. Patreon.com/Whisky Whistle. Check that out. Jump in and join Graeme and all of the great people. There are, I think, about 14 now. So that's where we're growing. That's always good. Sometimes down, sometimes up. And sometimes people leave for a while, then they come back. So, whatever you'd like to support, I'm happy with that. And yes, there are some benefits. Early advanced viewing of the Whisky Whistle videos, as well as your name in the credits, which are coming up right away. So make sure you watch those and jump in there, okay? Take care, everybody. Thanks a lot. Goodbye now.